everybody, what's good? I'm your host. My name is Professor Khalil Amani. I'm a Bible teacher extraordinaire. Thus, we are on part 8 of our Sodom and Gomorrah series. Anybody who's teaching about Sodom and Gomorrah and think that they can comprehensively tell the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in 1 or 2 hours in one video, they're fooling themselves, and they only believe that because they don't have the information to make it a series. Chances are those who teach Sodom and Gomorrah, chances are that they are strict 1611 King James Version of the Bible believers. And if that be the case, that they only have one source of authority, the 1611 King James Bible, then of course they can exhaust the Sodom and Gomorrah story with one video, because that's all they got. They are shit out of information. They run into a brick wall quickly. But when you study all of the extra biblical literature, it makes for more teaching. Have you ever seen anybody teach the Sodom and Gomorrah story? Now we're on part number 8, and each video is about an hour and 20 minutes long. An hour and 20 minutes long, and we're on the 8th part. Have you ever known a Bible teacher to give it up like that? No. These YouTube Bible teachers, they do one of two things. They either go over to somebody's channel and find a really wonderful narrated video of Sodom and Gomorrah with wonderful characters and colors and costumes, and they bring it over. They steal it from somewhere else, put it on their channel, and go like this. I've done Sodom and Gomorrah. We know one so-called woman, she says she's a truth seeker. That's exactly what she does. She don't add nothing to the goddamn conversation. She just goes over and pilfers and filches and gets her 5-finger discount on. She steals somebody else's intellectual property, downloads it to her computer, uploads it to her site, and she says, I'm done. I've exhausted the subject. There's another motherfucker on YouTube that claims he teaches Bible, a so-called king of these YouTube streets. This nigga here, listening to him teach Bible is like watching paint dry on a wall. The nigga don't hardly even come on camera no more. He's so fucked up, he don't even show his face hardly. He got an old white man up there, a white man from 500 years old, 500 years ago. Most people see that white man, they go, who is the white man on the man's thumbnail on his channel? His name is Machiavelli. But this particular YouTuber who teaches Bible, he claims to be a Tupac stan. And Tupac sang the song, Machiavelli. After the real Machiavelli. That's who the picture is on his channel. He just has that picture on his channel, and he hides behind it, and he tries to teach Bible. But it doesn't even make sense for him to have a picture of a European from 500 years ago. At least put the man's name under his on his chest so people can go, well, who is the man? At least do that. I just happen to know who Machiavelli is because I watch his channel every now and again. I know who he's trying to. He's trying to, summon up the spirit of Tupac by putting the European Machiavelli up there. Anyway, these motherfuckers, they don't know how to teach Bible. Whatever subject they teach, it's one video. It's 30 minutes. It's an hour. They don't do no series because they don't have it in them. They don't have the knowledge. And because they are bound and they got their arms are tied behind their backs in the reading of all of the ancient Near Eastern Jewish literature, and because they only accept the 1611 King James Bible, they run into a brick wall quickly. They don't have answers for the questions that people have. I got them over here. I am not bound by the Church of England and the 1611 King James Bible. I am not bound by the Catholic Church and all of their meetings and councils, the Council of Hippo, the Council of Carthage, the Council of Trent, the Second Council of Nicaea. I am not bound by those councils that the Catholic Church came about, which told us which Bibles were authoritative, which scriptures were authoritative, and which scriptures were canonical, from the word canon, which is the official list of books that make up the Bible. I'm not bound by that. Now, I want you to understand, as we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, that all of this is mythology. It's mythology. It's myth. None of this stuff about Sodom and Gomorrah is historical fact. Okay? That's why I can easily tell you about the ancient stories that proliferated, that were circulated in the ancient Near Eastern world from the Jewish mind. There were hundreds of stories. I hold all of them in the same barrel. It's all mythology. But when you talk to Christians, when you talk to Hebrew Israelites, when you talk to these so-called Israelites, they hold the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah as factual history. And because they hold them as factual history, they can't show you the full body of Jewish literature on the subject. They are beholden to what the Church of England and the Catholic Church has prescribed as authoritative and as canonical. And so they will look at someone like me, a teacher who shows you the full body of the literature of the ancient Near Eastern world, from the Jews, from the Hebrews, from the Israelites, and they will balk, bah, humbug, because they only believe in what those great Europeans from 500 years ago said. That's right. They only think that what the Europeans gave us as the King James Bible are the only authoritative and canonical scriptures. And they thumb their noses up and they balk and they get the stink face when you bring up other literature that was believed in and circulated in the ancient Near Eastern world. My goodness. But when you come over here, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm going to show you everything that they used to say. I'm going to show you everything that was once circulated from campfire to campfire, from town to hamlet, from city to city. I'm going to show you what they used to say and what they used to teach and what the stories that the ancient Israelites used to believe in and pass down from parent to child, from one generation to the next generation. I'm not going to tell you and keep my teaching limited to what the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church has prescribed as this is what you should believe, this is what you should read, and this is what you should teach. I leave that for the Christian world. I leave that for the Israelite world. They are bound by King James' 1611. I'm not. I'm not. My job on this channel is to show you all of the literature that the Israelites, that the Jews, that the Hebrews, that the Hebrew Israelites used to believe in. I don't give a fuck if it's right or wrong. My job is to show you, do you know that they used to teach this? Do you know that they used to believe this? But when you want to get right down to it, understand that this whole series on Sodom and Gomorrah falls under the heading of mythology. Not historicity, not fact. It's mythology. But what is myth? What is mythology? You think you know? Well, the leading mythologist, Joseph Campbell, the leading mythologist, Mircea Eliade, show you them real quick. Show you them, folks. Let's see, can we find their books? And then this one, and okay. There we go. The leading mythologist, Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. I said Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. If you haven't read Joseph Campbell and his take on mythology, you probably don't know a lot about mythology. You just think you do. But Joseph Campbell is the leading authority on mythology. Another leading authority is, this one's Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade. This book is called The Universal Myths. And there you have it again. Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade. These two are the two top mythological teachers in the world. Facts upon facts. Mythology. I also have a book called The World of Myth. The World of Myth by David Leming. So I understand myth. And I understand that this Sodom story, it falls under the guise of mythology. But what is myth? According to Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade, you know how they would define mythology? They would define mythology as a story that's not altogether true, yet not altogether untrue. Did you hear what I said? I said Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade would define mythology as a story that is not altogether true, yet not altogether untrue. What does that mean? It means that there are probably some factual and some historical relevancies to the story, but the story has been embellished. The word embellished is a fancy word for lie, tall tale, making up stuff. But somewhere in the story there is some truths. There's some truths. That's what mythology is. So understand, as we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, we're talking about mythology. Did you know that archaeology and all biblical and religious scholars agree that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah have never been found or discovered. That most, if not all, scholars of the Bible agree that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not to be taken as a historical event, but as a, figurative and a symbolic story. Did you know, as far as archaeology goes, archaeology has dismissed there ever being a city called Sodom or Gomorrah? That those cities have never been located in all of the excavations and digs in the ancient world, ancient Near East. We have never found Sodom or Gomorrah. By all indications, Sodom and Gomorrah is fictitious. And when we understand that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is mythology, and when we understand that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah has no archaeological proof for its existence, this is when we can tell the ancient Near Eastern stories, all of them, and stop relegating our conversation to the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. But if you ask a Christian, if you ask a Hebrew Israelite, they really believe Sodom and Gomorrah really happened. Even though archaeology can't find it, can't find the cities. Even though the consensus among archaeologists and scholars is that these cities never existed and that this is in the realm of mythology. I just wanted to open this part 8 with that conversation. Lest you think I believe in this crap that I'm teaching. I don't. But what I do believe in is exploring all of the literature of the ancient Near Eastern Jewish world. I believe in sharing all of the literature of those ancient Hebrews, those ancient Israelites. Not just the literature that was given to us through the various churches, the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church. I don't believe in that. I believe in laying all of it on the table and let's look at it all. Let's look at it all. And when you do that, it's eye-opening to say the least. Now let's jump into it. Part 8. And so in part 7, we left off talking about the Sodomites 4-day festival. Again, if this is your first video on Sodom and Gomorrah and you haven't seen parts 1 through 7, may I suggest you go back and start with the introduction and work your way through these videos. Do one video a day. But if you're a Billy Badass and you think you know what Sodom and Gomorrah stood for and what really happened, then jump your badass right on in here. But the litmus test as to if you know about Sodom and Gomorrah is this. If you think Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of their homosexual practices, if you think Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because they were gay, homosexual, LGBTQ folks, if you think that's the reason for Sodom's destruction, then you need to go back to the beginning and you don't know shit about Sodom and Gomorrah. Let me state it up front. Let me slap your ego real quick. If you think Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction was the result of homosexuality, then you are deaf, dumb, ignorant, and blind. You just a polywanna cracker parakeet. You're just regurgitating some shit that you heard in church, some shit you heard at the temple. You just blind. And if you think Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because of homosexuality, this is the series for you. Open your mind, take that bullshit, homophobic garbage out of your brain and sit it on the shelf. And after you watch all of these series, if you still want to pick it up and put it back in there and believe the garbage that you've been taught by orthodoxy, whether it was Orthodox Christianity or Orthodox Israelitism, then fine. Then fine. And so in part 7, I introduced some ancient Near Eastern literature written by the ancient Israelites that would suggest that the ancient Jews, the ancient Hebrews, the ancient Israelites, they had a 4-day festival. Go back to part 7. They had a 4-day festival. Go back to part 7. And in this 4-day festival, it was like the series, the movies, The Purge. You know, The Purge. When the sun goes down, you can kill your neighbor, kill whoever you want for 8 hours, and then you go back to being regular old citizens. So it was with the citizens of Sodom. The Purge. They had laws. They had a high holy invocation. They had a whole 4 days of sexual debauchery, fornication, adultery, pedophilia, bestiality, bisexualism, homosexualism, child rape, adult rape, anything that a man could do with his penis, anything that a woman could do with her vagina was open and okay. We read and talked about this in part 7, that a man during these 4 days, not during the daytime, but when the sun set. When the sun set, a man could go next door to his neighbor's house. He can go right next door to Bob and Sally's house, walk in the front door, grab his neighbor's wife, grab that bitch by the hair, drag her out. He don't even have to drag her out because the law said she had to go. And she would take her apron off after doing the dishes, and she would become the property of the neighbor, and he would take her home, and he would blow that bitch's back out. The husband next door could hear his wife getting 8, 9, 10 inches of dick, screaming louder than he ever could make her scream. Beat her up sexually all night long. And when the sun came up, she put back on her dress and panties and walked back next door to her husband, kissed her husband in the lips and said, "Would you like some breakfast?" With cum-stained lips. I said, the neighbor from down the corner, Bob, on these 4 festival days, when the sun set, he could go a few houses down and see a 13-year-old girl that he knows ain't never had sex. A pure virgin. Oh yeah. A 13-year-old girl with breastises that are very tender and perky. A little heart-shaped ass. And that grown-ass man could go to his neighbor's house, walk in his neighbor's front door, grab another man's virgin daughter, and take her home and deflower her. Fuck her in all kinds of ungodly positions. Break her hymen, pop her cherry, put many inches of cock up in her, have her screaming to the top of her lungs, pass that little virgin around to the man's sons, to the man's uncles. Just treat that little girl like a piece of trash. And when the sun came up, dress that little 13-year-old girl and tell her goodbye and send her back to her mother and father. And her mother and father, by the law of Sodom, couldn't do shit about it. Facts upon facts. I said a neighbor, a male neighbor, could see a little 12, 13-year-old teenage boy, cute as fuck, handsome, who has a homosexual proclivity. He can go over there and get that boy, put that boy in a headlock. He ain't got to force it because that was the law. The boy had to go with him. Take that boy home, get some Vaseline, some baby oil, some lotion, grease that little 12, 13-year-old boy's sphincter muscle, his booty hole up, and run roughshod on that teenage boy. The same thing for some of those promiscuous women, married women. They could see a little 13, 14-year-old boy that's coming along just fine. He's a teenage boy. He's grown up. He's got a little height on him. He's got pubic hair now. She's been looking at him all year. And that married woman, she could go over and tell that boy, you come here. And she can molest that teenage boy. Same thing, a woman could go and see a pretty little teenage girl. And if she's of the lesbian persuasion, she can grab that little 12, 13-year-old girl, take her home, and they can munch carpet, eat her out, turn her out. Oh, and they did have dildos back in those days. They had wooden dildos that they had fashioned and shapen like penises. They had strap-ons back in those days. The Bible tells us that. That's another time. I'll show you that. And you had women playing the lesbian role that would have sex with other women, other wives. And you had women that would have sex with teenage girls. And you had women that had strange fetishes like pegging. Shout out to Gorilla Hebrew. You had women who had fetishes like pegging men. You had women that were into cuckolding. All of these sexual fetishes were going on in Sodom. Facts upon facts. Facts upon facts. So let's review what I'm talking about. In part 7, I read from a book called Hebrew Myths. I know the book is kind of dirty, it's old. Hebrew Myths. And for those who didn't see part 7, let us read about that sacred and high holy festival of the Sodomites that lasted 4 days. Every evening when the sun went down, everything I just talked about went down. All kind of sexual licentiousness, sexual lasciviousness, sexual debauchery, sexual profligation. I know those are big words. A lot of fucking and sucking went on. And it was legal. And let's just review it before we get to where we want to really be. And so we read. That ain't the page. Here we go. And so we read. Sodom was secure against attack. Yet to discourage visitors, key in on that word visitor. A visitor, a stranger, an out-of-towner. Notice it says, yet to discourage visitors. In other words, Sodom did not like visitors, strangers, out-of-towners. They were a closed-off society because they were rich as fuck. We talked about that earlier. See, it's right here. The Sodomites were amongst the richest nations. They were super rich. And because they were rich, the Sodomites were secure against attacks. Yet to discourage visitors, out-of-towners, bums and vagrants and homeless people. To discourage, to make them not want to come. To discourage visitors. Its citizens passed a law. See, this shit was real. It was a real law passed by the citizens of Sodom, that whoever offered a stranger, see, a stranger and a visitor is the same thing. They passed a law, the citizens passed a law, that whatever citizen of Sodom or Gomorrah offered a stranger food should be burned alive. My goodness. If you lived in Sodom, if you were a citizen of Sodom, you could not offer a stranger one piece of bread. If you got caught doing it, you would be burned alive. Instead, the stranger, the visitor, must be robbed of all he had and flung from the city stark naked. Got it? Now for the 4-day festival. Once a year, they held a feast and danced on grass beside springs of water to the sound of drums. Once a year, they had a feast. The Sodomites. When they had well drunken, every man would seize his neighbor's wife. That sounds like a heterosexual couple. A man and wife is not homosexuality. But we're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. And the ideal that for the last 2,000 years, people have taught that Sodom's destruction was because of their homosexuality. But now we're reading that in the city of Sodom, every man would seize his neighbor's wife, man, woman, male, female, heterosexualism, straight folk business. Every man would seize his neighbor's wife or his virgin daughter and enjoy her, have sex with her. Nor did any heterosexual man care whether his own wife, heterosexual wife or daughter, were sporting with his neighbor, but all made merry together from dawn to dusk, from the setting of the sun to the rising of the sun, from about 7 p.m. to about 6 a.m. During those 4 days of festival, and returned home unabashed, unashamed, like everything was okay. Like they just went to the store to get a can of corn and returned home. Now check this out. Beds have to do with nighttime activity. Beds were placed in the streets of Sodom for measuring strangers. If a man proved to be shorter than the bed on which he had been laid, 3 Sodomites would seize his legs, 3 more his head and arms, and stretch him until he fitted. But if he proved to be longer than the bed, they forced his head downward and his legs upward. When the poor wretched stranger, they're not talking about the citizens. They aren't talking about the citizens of Sodom. They're talking about people, strangers. Let's go back. It's talking about visitors. It's talking about strangers. See string? And then on the next page, strangers. They put them in these beds. But if he proved to be longer than the bed, they forced the stranger or the visitor, they forced his head downward and his legs upward. When the poor wretched visitor who wasn't from Sodom cried out in a death agony, the Sodomites said, "Peace! This is an ancient custom here." All right. I just want to do that as a review from part 7. Because some of y'all you just jumping in here and hearing this shit for the first time. Like, what? I never heard that they were doing that. The Sodomites had nothing but hatred and enmity against anybody who wasn't a citizen or a resident of that closed 5-city confederacy. If you weren't from Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, or Zoar, you were anathema to that population. You were an enemy. They discouraged you from coming. And the reason they didn't want outsiders coming to Sodom is because the Sodomites had grown rich as fuck. So rich that they found gold and silver and pearls and precious jewelry right under the soil of their vegetation. This is the myth of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is the myth. They were super, super rich. They go out there to harvest some corn and feel something hard under the corn and dig a little bit. It was 5 pounds of gold. Solid 24 karat gold. Yeah. That's right here. That's right here. See, the Sodomites were among the richest of nations. See? For if a man needed potherbs, he would say to a slave, "Go, fetch me some." Likewise, when the slave would visit a field and discover gold beneath their roots. Likewise, when corn was harvested, silver, pearls, and precious stones were found to have bred beneath the stubble. Great riches, however, led men astray. A Sodomite never gave so much as a crumb of bread to any stranger. I told you that. They were so rich, but they wouldn't give a crumb. They wouldn't give a crumb of bread to a stranger. All right, I got to get to what I want to get to in this part. But it's always good to go and review and understand the nature of the Sodomites. Rich and stingy. That's going to be a theme later on down the road. Rich and stingy. But now let's go back to the Bible. Let's go back to the Bible. Let's go back to the Genesis Sodom story in Genesis chapter 19. I got a few questions and I'm going to make some statements. We are told that 2 angels or 2 men came to Sodom in the evening time. And Sodom was there at the gate at the opening of the city to meet and greet them. He didn't know they were coming. He just happened to be chilling at the entrance of the city of Sodom. And when Lot saw these two men, he bowed down and worshiped them, and then he said to them, you all can come. Please come to my house, and you can rest and wash your feet and eat, and in the morning you can go your way. He was being generous. Lot was being hospitable. Lot understood that these two people, he didn't call them angels. He called them men. Lot understood that these two men were strangers. Lot also understood the city codes and the laws of Sodom, which I just read to you. I just read to you that if a citizen came, a non-citizen, if a visitor or a stranger came to Sodom, you weren't allowed to feed a visitor or stranger. To do so meant you could get burned up. And those visitors would be robbed at gunpoint, robbed at knife point, stripped bucket naked, and ran out of the city. We just read that. And Lot, being a citizen of Sodom, he knew full well that these two angels were in trouble for coming into their city as strangers and visitors. But Lot didn't panic just yet. Lot simply said, hey, y'all want to come on home with me? He's looking around because he know if he's spotted feeding these strangers, he can get killed, burned alive. He know if he gets caught feeding these strangers, they're going to take those strangers and they're going to rob them of all they have and then strip them down to nothingness and run them out of the town stark naked. He knew that. So when Lot sees these visitors, you better believe he's paranoid as fuck. He's looking around and he says, hey, you all come stay with me, and you can rest, you can eat, you can have food, you can get your feet washed, and then in the morning. See, Lot says it's nighttime. He says just stay at my house in the evening time. Why the evening? Why were they free? Why were they free to go in the morning time? See, this is stuff you don't know because you don't read the extra biblical narrative. See, Lot says, and he, Lot, said, behold now, my lords, to the two angels, aka the two men, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry or wait or stay all night, and wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your ways. Why is it that at nighttime they need to stay in the house, but in the morning time they could rise up early and go on your ways? Something's missing from the narrative, from the story. But now that we have these ancient Hebrew myths, the picture becomes quite clear. The picture becomes quite clear. Lot wanted to get those niggas out of the streets at night because the high holy 4-day festival of the Sodomites was in full progress. The Bible doesn't say that, but we are doing our investigative journalism And it's apparent that Lot was worried about their safety. At nighttime, Lot says in the morning time, you can get up early in the morning and go your ways. It was safe in the morning. It was safe in the morning. But at nighttime, he said, come on in my house. But to the dismay of Lot, the two angels say, hell to the no, no. They know that they are sent by God Almighty on a fact-finding mission, on a reconnaissance mission to see what the fuck is actually going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. And because they are down there in Sodom on business, official deity visit, they were there on an official God visit. They were there on official business. They weren't there to pussyfoot around and have conversation with Lot and, enjoy his house and wash their feet and eat and have a good night rest. No. Lot had them all fucked up. And so when Lot offers the hospitality of his home to rest, they reject Lot. Proof that they weren't there for Lot at all. They reject Lot and say, no, nay, but we will abide in the streets all night. I said they reject. After he says, come to my house and wash your feet and rise up early and go your ways. And they, the two men, the two angels said, nay or no, but we will abide, we will stay in the street all night. Now Lot gets worried. Now Lot is upset. Now Lot has some fear and some trepidation. And then Lot, he pressed upon them greatly. And then they turned in unto him and entered unto his house. Got it? I'm giving you the missing pieces. But check it. They in the house. They made their introductions. The angels were talking to Lot. Angels were talking to his wife. Angels were talking to his family. None of this is written in the Bible, but we can assume that. Because Lot had a wife and Lot had daughters. So it's a foregone conclusion that Lot introduced these two men to his family. Sitting down, talking. The angels may have told them what they were there for or not. The angels may have kept it cool and just said, didn't let him know that they were really from heaven. We just passing through. And Lot may have actually told them, well, you came at kind of a bad time of the year. That Sodom is actually going through their 4 days of festivities. 4 days of sexual debauchery. Lot may have even told them that I pressed upon you greatly to get out of the streets, because everything that's bad and wicked and vile is just outside of my doors. That they doing some fornication, some adultery, some pedophilia. I'm talking about heterosexuals and bisexuals and homosexual people. They're doing all kind of sexual nastiness out there. And by the way, you two brothers, I'm Lot. Lot's talking. Lot said to these two men, probably during that time they were in the house, our city, Sodom, they don't allow strangers here. If they caught me feeding you, they would burn me alive. If they caught me feeding you, they would rob you two brothers of all you got, and then they would strip you down stark naked and run you out of Sodom. That's why I said, come on, get out of the streets. It ain't safe out there. Now, granted, it's not like the men of the city of Sodom came right away. We don't know how much time expired from the time that the two men, the two angels, go into Sodom's house to the first knock on the door. It might have been an hour. It might have been 2 hours. But guess what? Somebody amongst the citizens of Sodom saw these two angels, saw these two men come into the city of Sodom, and they saw those two men go into Lot's house. You better believe it. And within minutes, whatever citizen saw it, he ran to the other Sodomites and said, there are two visitors in our city. There are two strangers in our city. And the Sodomites go, ooh, yes, yeah. We got some victims. Where they at? They at Brother Lot's house. Now understand, the Bible says that the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round. And then it said all the people. Now we're talking about circa 1300 BCE or something like that. There wasn't no telephones. There was only tell a nigga back then. So the word spread fast. But even more than that, how did all of these people just all of a sudden surround Lot's house? How did that happen? Dare I say, they were already in the streets at their annual 4-day festival. That's how they were able to just go up to Lot's house that quickly. They were already in the streets. They were already doing sexual debauchery type shit. All it took for one person to say, hey, there's two strangers. Hey, there's two visitors at Lot's house. What? And they started talking about it real quick. Real quick. All the people were already outside getting shit-faced drunk, doing fornication, committing adultery, committing child rape and child pedophilia. They were already out there. They were already out there. And when the word spread fast as lightning, without a telephone, just tell a nigga, they bum rushed Lot's house. And so the men go in after Lot presses greatly upon them. The two angels, the two men, they did turn in unto him and entered into Lot's house. See? And he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. Now, it says they made them a feast. They cooked. They did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. This is proof positive that some time had elapsed, some time had expired before they got that knock at the door by the people of Sodom. You ever seen that? No, you haven't. It tells us three things that happened before the Sodomites actually come looking for some booty hole. It says Lot made them dinner. It says Lot baked them unleavened bread. And finally it says they did eat. How much time do you think that is? And during that dinner, surely Lot informed those two men about the time in which they had arrived at Sodom during the 4-day annual Feast of Fuckery. You think they sat there and ate and nobody said nothing at the dinner table? You think that Lot wasn't inquisitive about where these men were going? Why did they come to Sodom? What was their mission? Are they passing through? Are they going to stay? How long are they going to stay? You think Lot didn't ask these two men, why do you niggas want to stay in the streets all night? What was that about? I asked you if you want to come and stay with me, and you told me no. We're going to abide in the street all night. You think that Lot didn't ask them? Why did they want to stay in the street? Furthermore, you think Lot did not discuss with them the reasons why he wanted them to come out of the street? You think Lot didn't inform them that they had arrived during the 4-day fuckery festival of sexual debauchery? You think those discussions didn't go on? Before the men of Sodom came a-knocking, a lot of shit went on. A lot of stuff. Lot made them dinner. How long does it take to prepare dinner? Half hour? 45 minutes? Lot baked unleavened bread. How long does it take unleavened bread to bake? And then Lot said they fed them. They had dinner together. How long did they sit at the dinner table? Half hour? 45 minutes? Maybe they even had dessert and ice cream. Maybe they had a lot of laughs. Maybe it was serious. These are the things that the Bible doesn't tell you. These are things that you people, you gloss over. You want to get straight to the men of Sodom trying to get at the booty. But that's not the way the narrative reads. The narrative reads that time elapsed. An hour, 2 hours. Time enough for Lot to cook a dinner. Time enough to bake unleavened bread, and time enough for the angels and Lot's family to sit down and have a wonderful dinner. 2 hours? 2 hours, that sound about right? Hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours that they had been there. A long time. And then we have another clue. We have another clue. That the men that came to visit Lot put on their pajamas and was getting ready for bed. It says, before the men lay down, that's when the doorbell rang. They were about to lay down and call it a night. All of that food gave those angels niggeritis. If you black and from the hood, you know what I'm talking about. You get niggeritis. You get sleepy and tired after your belly is full from soul food. I'm going to go lay down for a little bit. But understand that from the time the men walked into Lot's house, there's a window of about anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours that they sat undisturbed because Lot was in the kitchen cooking. Lot was baking unleavened bread, and they sat down and had dinner. 2 or 3 hour window where there was nothing going on but peace and harmony and great conversation between Lot and the two men, aka two angels. Anywhere between 2 and 3 hours had elapsed. That is so much time. That is time so that when those two angels came into that city and one of the citizens of Sodom happened to see those two strangers going into the house of Lot, he went expeditiously right away, straight away, B times, he went and started spreading the word that there was fresh meat in the city. And those fresh meats was at Lot's house. He had about a 2 or 3 hour window for that to spread like wildfire. But the Sodomites were already in full debauchery mode. They were in full swing. They were laying on the grass, drinking Mad Dog 2020, drinking Night Train, getting blitzed, fucked up, inebriated, and drunk. And when that citizen saw those two men go into Lot's house, he went and told the crowd just around the corner a few blocks where they were doing their annual 4-day festival. I tell you, God did not send those angels to earth on no random Tuesday, on no random week. He sent them down there at the specified and specific time of the Sodomite 4-day festival. And so while Lot and the two angels and Lot's family were sitting at the dinner table over this 2-hour, 3-hour span between cooking the main course and baking unleavened bread, and then saying, all right, everybody come to the table, let's say prayer, and them sitting down and them talking and getting to know one another. How you doing? Where you from? How long you staying? What's your name? What's your name? All that stuff. The pleasantries. Surely the angels told them their names. Oh, my name is Gabriel. My name is Uriel. Lot learned a lot. Lot learned a lot. Lot learned a lot over that dinner. The angels learned a lot over that dinner. They learned if they didn't know, if God didn't tell them. Lot told them, you are here at a bad time. Just round the corner, they are having their annual 4-day festival of sexual debauchery. And if you niggas had stayed in the streets, you niggas would have had your asses run through. They would have fucked the dog shit out of you. And they would have put you niggas on beds. And if you were too big for the bed, they would have crunched you into that bed. 3 sodomites at your feet and 3 sodomites at your head. They would have tied you down in agony. If you niggas would have stayed in the street, they would have tied you to some beds. And if the beds were too big for you all, they would have put you on the bed. 3 held you at the feet and 3 held you at the head, and they would have stretched your body, tied ropes to you, and made you scream bloody murder. And as you two guys screamed for your life, they would have told you to shut the fuck up. They would have said, peace, be still, because this is our ancient custom. How do they say it? Peace. This is an ancient custom here. That's what you two men almost got yourself into. This is the kind of shit that Lot would have been telling them over dinner. My goodness, isn't it wonderful when you have the actual scriptures that aren't in the Bible that put this puzzle together? I mean, think about it. As many times as you read the Sodom story, you just ran right over the fact that there was probably a 2 or 3 hour window between the visitors going into Lot's house and the men and the people of Sodom surrounding the house. About 2-3 hours. You run right past that. You don't care nothing about the fact that Lot went in the kitchen and put on an apron and cooked for these gentlemen. You don't care nothing about the fact that Lot even baked unleavened bread. You run right past the fact that Lot sat them down at the dinner table and they actually had a dinner and finished the dinner. You run right past that. You run right past the fact that these angels went into the bedroom and was about to put on their pajamas when the ring at the door came. It says they were about to lay down and go to sleep. We talk about a 2 or 3 hour window before the Sodomites came there. But the reason that the Sodomites were pretty quick, within 2 or 3 hours, the whole city had been informed and they were surrounding the house. It wasn't just the men. To refresh your memory, we've already gone over this in parts, 2 or 3 or whatever. But to refresh your memory, before the two angels, and Lot and his family, before they turned the lights off and before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young. Now, don't miss this next line. All the people from every quarter. People are men, people are women, and people are children. But understand that before they came, several hours had passed because Lot made them a feast. Not a happy meal. A feast is like a 5 or 7 course dinner. And he did bake unleavened bread. And then they had a dinner because they ate it. That takes time. But during those 2 or 3 hours, that window, and after they ate and was about to lay down, 2 or 3 hours had gone by. And this is when the men and the women, young and old, and children, all the people from every quarter came to Lot's house. See, these people right here, all the people from every quarter, they were already in the streets celebrating their annual 4-day festival of fuckery. They were already in the streets. All it took was for one person to see these people go into Lot's house and the shit spread by like wildfire. It took a couple hours because they had to get together. The men of Sodom, who are the leaders. I said the men of Sodom, who are the leaders. I said the men of Sodom, even the men of Sodom, they were the leaders of the debauchery. But understand that they brought all the people with them from every quarter. Yeah. Facts. They came there because of this. They came there, the whole city turned out because of this right here. Once a year they held a feast. It is my position in the myth that the two angels visited Sodom at this specific time of the year when they were holding their annual feast. Once a year they held a feast and danced on grass beside springs of water to the sound of drums. When they had well drunken, every man would seize his neighbor's wife. All of that was going on the night that the two angels visited Sodom. There was some raping and some fornication and some adultery and some homosexual acts and some bisexual acts and some bestiality and some pedophilia already going on. This is why the two angels wanted to stay in the streets all night. They wanted to observe this sexual debauchery. This is why the men say, but we, the angel says, but we will abide in the street all night. Because they were on a reconnaissance mission and they wanted to see all of this. They wanted to see this once a year festival, this feast. They wanted to watch these people dance on grass beside springs of water to the sound of drums. They wanted to see that when they had all drunken, they wanted to see every man, heterosexual, straight man, married man, all the men would seize his neighbor's wife. Married people performing all types of sexual abominations. Married people, heterosexual people, man and wife, performing adultery. These angels wanted to see this shit. They wanted to see men snatched away their neighbor's virgin daughters and enjoy them. Nor did any man, any heterosexual man, care whether his own heterosexual wife or daughter was sporting with his neighbor, but all made merry together from dawn to dusk during those 4 days of festival. You got it? This, I tell you, is when the Sodomites the angels came to town. They came during the appropriate time, during the 4 days of festival. And this is what Lot was afraid of. Lot knew that there was going to be some beds, and these beds were going to be placed in the streets of Sodom at night for measuring strangers like these two angels. They were going to be measured. They were measuring strangers. And if a man or if these angels proved to be shorter than the bed on which they had been laid, 3 Sodomites would seize these angels' legs, and 3 more would seize these angels' head and arms and stretch these angels until they fitted in the bed. But if these angels proved to be longer than the bed, they would force their heads downward and force their legs upward. And when these poor, wretched angels cried out in a death agony, the Sodomites said, "Peace, this is an ancient custom here." If it's an ancient custom, that means it had been going on since time immemorial. If it was an ancient custom, surely Lot, way before the angels even came, surely in bygone years, Lot had seen the stretching or shortening of the people in the beds in the streets of the city. Surely Lot had seen this egregious display of humanity years ago before these two angels came. And surely this is why Lot, in the Bible, where it says that Lot pressed greatly upon the angels to get the fuck out of the streets. Who has ever given it to you like this? Who has ever made sense of why Lot was so hell-bent on getting the angels out of the streets of Sodom? Who has ever given you a reason that makes sense as to why Lot says, get your ass out of the streets. I'm pressing you fuck niggas to come home with me. Clearly, Lot was aware of the city's laws against the stranger or the visitor. Clearly, Lot was aware of the exercise in pain and punishment. Clearly, Lot was aware of the beds and how they use those beds in the streets to shorten a person's body or to stretch a person's body in a death agony. Surely, Lot understood everything about Sodom. For Lot had been there for years and had seen strangers get stretched on those beds. Lot had been there for years and Lot had seen strangers get compressed in those beds. And he didn't want that for these two strangers, aka these two angels. You got a better explanation as to why Lot pressed greatly upon the angels to get out of the streets? I'll sit back and I'll listen to it. You know what's weird? On this part 8, I haven't even got to what part 8 was supposed to be about. Did you hear what I said? This is part 8. And I woke up saying, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this little girl that set in motion Sodom's destruction. Part 8 was supposed to be about a little girl that was murdered for feeding a stranger, which caused God to go ape shit crazy and destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. We didn't even get to it. That's what part 8 was supposed to be about. But I knew I had unfinished business with this Sodom story, with the burning beds in the streets of Sodom, with the time lapse that Lot had plenty of time to go in and cook, to bake unleavened bread, to have a feast, to have dinner, to sit down and get to know these people. A lot of time went by. But during those 2 or 3 hours, that's when the word was spreading to the people that were already enjoying their annual feast of fuckery, their 4 days of sexual debauchery. And so while Lot and his family and these two angels sat at meat, sat at dinner, and traded niceties and learned a little bit about each other and learned a little bit about Sodom. Because you got to understand, these two angels were there in Sodom on a fact-finding mission. They were there on a reconnaissance mission. And if that be the case, you better believe that the angels asked Lot a series of questions about Sodom. You better believe that the angels asked a lot of questions to Lot about Sodom. And you better believe that Lot told these angels about the 4-day festival in which they had came at that exact time, and the trouble and the peril and the danger that lies in the dark in the streets of Sodom. You better believe that these conversations were talked about over that dinner. And so while I didn't even get to what I was trying to talk about, this was a discussion that needed to be had. Because we read and we gloss over shit. We don't even understand that there probably was a 2, 3, maybe even 4 hour window before those men of the city of Sodom and all the people surrounded Lot's house. A lot of time went by. And since a lot of time went by, we have to know that Lot and those two angels, Lot and those two men, had a lot of conversations about the going-ons in Sodom. We're just glad and we're just lucky that we have these extra biblical writings that fill in the blanks as to the nature and the customs and the celebratory days of the Sodomites. It makes sense. Part 8, end. Come back for part 9. It just gets deeper. We'll see you soon. Peace.